We've always treated water as a constant, a stable input, a background variable, a resource so essential and so abundant that we rarely questioned its availability. Cities expanded because water would be there. Agriculture concentrated because water would be there. Industry scaled because water would be there. The modern world was built on that single expectation. But that expectation was never a guarantee. And once water becomes unstable, not unavailable, just unstable, every system connected to it begins to shift. This is how that shift happens. Globally, water isn't scarce. It's uneven, unpredictable, and structurally mismanaged. That distinction is critical, because societies don't collapse when a resource disappears. They collapse when the systems built around that resource stop matching reality. For decades, our planning models assumed three things: that water volumes would remain steady, that rainfall patterns would be predictable, and that our infrastructure would scale with our population. None of these assumptions hold true today, not because of a single event, but because the underlying logic has changed. Stability became volatility, volatility became cost, and cost became inequality. Cape Town is the clearest modern example of how quickly a stable system can become fragile. The city didn't face a natural disaster. It faced structural pressure. Its population grew. Agricultural demand expanded beyond projections. Infrastructure upgrades lagged behind. And the historical rainfall averages that everyone had relied on simply stopped applying. Reservoirs that once seemed oversized became dangerously insufficient. When the water levels fell enough to threaten the entire municipal supply, the city introduced a phrase the world had never taken seriously before: Day Zero. Not a metaphor, but a measurable point in time when water would no longer flow from the taps. The response was immediate and drastic. Public facilities reduced their operations. Businesses rewired their processes. Residents cut their consumption down to emergency levels. People lined up at natural springs in scenes that looked like something from a historical archive, not modern life. Cape Town avoided total collapse, but just barely. The lesson wasn't that the crisis ended. The lesson was that our water systems can reach critical thresholds much faster than we expect. And that recovery depends more on human behavior than it does on engineering. Then there's California, which demonstrates a different kind of scarcity: economic scarcity. The state is one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth, but the water that enables that productivity is neither local nor abundant. It is allocated, saved, moved, bought, traded, and financialized. Over decades, water rights in California became assets. It could be purchased and sold just like stocks. In drought years, their value skyrocketed. Large agricultural corporations locked in their stability through long-term contracts. Smaller farms, on the other hand, were forced to buy water on the spot market at prices determined entirely by scarcity. As shortages intensified and snowpack declined, investors entered the system. They didn't buy water to drink it. They bought water rights to hold them as financial instruments. Scarcity became an opportunity. This isn't a failure of capitalism. It's just how markets behave when an essential resource becomes limited. But markets distribute resources based on purchasing power, not on necessity. Municipalities paid higher rates. Industries negotiated long-term guarantees. And households faced restrictions, not market prices. Economic scarcity became social scarcity. Not because the water disappeared, but because access to it was completely reorganized. And then we have the Colorado River. This is a different problem altogether. It's not operational, and it's not economic, it's structural. Tens of millions of people depend on this river. Cities, farms, industries, and power plants are all governed by treaties and agreements that were written in another era. From the very beginning, those agreements allocated more water than the river actually produces. It was overpromised from the start. Climate change didn't create this deficit. it just revealed it. Snowpack decreased. Temperatures rose. Evaporation accelerated. The gap between promised water and actual water widened. The water levels in Lake Mead and Lake Powell fell so low that they threatened hydropower stability to drop, not only in water, but in electricity for millions of people. The problem wasn't politics. It was math. A river cannot supply more water than it contains. Renegotiation became inevitable. But renegotiation is political, and every region claims necessity. Agriculture claims priority to protect the food supply. Cities claim priority to protect their populations. Energy providers claim priority to protect the grid. Native nations reference their legal treaties. Mexico references international agreements. Everyone is correct, but no one can win. This is structural scarcity, a system where demand fundamentally exceeds the limits, and every single adjustment is painful. Viewed together, these three cases are not isolated events. They are early signals of a global transition. Cape Town illustrates operational scarcity. California illustrates economic scarcity. The Colorado River illustrates structural scarcity. Three different forms, all pointing in one direction. Water is becoming more variable, less predictable, and increasingly tied to financial, legal, and geopolitical systems. As this volatility increases, governance changes. Cities introduce usage restrictions. States renegotiate rights. Courts are left to resolve disputes that will define who gets water for decades to come. Corporations start treating water as a risk category, a variable that must be hedged, insured, or diversified away. Financial institutions analyze water insecurity as a credit risk for agriculture. International organizations monitor water stress as an early indicator of social instability. This shift is already happening right now. Infrastructure is changing too. Desalination is expanding in places where energy is cheap and natural supply is limited. Water recycling systems are growing, but they require huge capital investments that many regions simply lack. In turbase, transfers moving water from one watershed to another create political conflict even when they are technically feasible. The cost of reliability is increasing. Regions with strong institutions and strong finances can adapt. Regions without them will struggle. This creates a new kind of inequality, not between people, but between places. Places with capacity can maintain their stability. Places without capacity will face chronic scarcity. Industries are adapting. Manufacturing that requires heavy water usage is relocating or automating. Agriculture is consolidating. Large entities are securing long-term water rights, while small producers are losing their competitive ground because they cannot absorb the volatility. Hydropower is becoming less reliable, forcing utilities to diversify their energy sources. Real estate values are shifting based on perceived water security. Investors are beginning to price water access into their long-term valuations. Water is becoming a variable in economic forecasting, not just an environmental concern, but a financial one. Residential life is changing through regulation. Outdoor water usage is declining. Appliances are becoming more efficient. Landscaping is changing. Urban design is adapting. But behavioral adaptation has its limits. When scarcity deepens, management alone is not enough. Cities will have to choose how to allocate their supply: food production, industry, municipal use, energy, environmental preservation. Every priority is valid. Every one of them requires water, and no choice is painless. As scarcity grows, the idea of water as a universal right weakens. Legally, it remains essential. But practically, it becomes conditional. Conditional on infrastructure, conditional on investment, conditional on governance. This doesn't mean water will become exclusive. It means stability becomes a premium product of systems that some regions can maintain and others cannot. And when stability is uneven, water starts to resemble a luxury. Not because it's rare, but because reliability now has a price. This transformation is gradual. Cape Town showed us the speed of operational collapse. California showed us the logic of markets under scarcity. The Colorado River showed us the limits of physical systems. Together, they describe a future where water is managed, not assumed. It's priced, not guaranteed. It's negotiated, not just delivered. And it's stable only where institutions are strong. This is not a temporary disruption. It is a structural shift. A future defined not by the disappearance of water, but by the disappearance of predictability. Because societies don't need water to run out for everything to change. They only need the reliability to break. And once that breaks, the assumption that water is infinite never returns. In the decades ahead, water will likely become the denominator of economic planning, the variable every region must solve before anything else. Energy grids, housing expansion, industrial output, agricultural yields, credit markets, and even geopolitical alliances will increasingly be evaluated through one question: is there enough water to sustain this system? In previous centuries, wealth followed land. In the industrial age, it followed energy. In the digital age, it followed information. In the emerging era, it may very well follow water stability. Not because water is rare, but because reliability is becoming the true scarcity. This shift doesn't end modern society. It reorganizes it. Regions that adapt early will anchor their economies on resilience. Regions that delay will anchor them on uncertainty. And as that gap widens, water will stop being an invisible input and become a visible boundary shaping where people live, what they grow, what they build, and how they plan for the future. The world isn't moving toward a single water crisis. It's moving toward a spectrum of water realities where access depends on capacity. Scarcity depends on geography, and stability depends on systems that were never designed for volatility. In this world, water becomes something new, a resource whose availability depends on your position within a system that can no longer promise certainty. And that is when water stops being an expectation and starts becoming a luxury.